Hulk Hogan's final will has been unveiled, and what lies within its pages has stunned fans and insiders alike. A man who lived larger than life, whose name defined an era of wrestling, left behind not just material gifts but a legacy of depth, redemption, and heartfelt confession. In this emotionally powerful and deeply human story, we dive beyond the myth of the Immortal One and into the heart of Terry Bollea, the man behind Hulkamania. As the Florida sky dimmed into an amber haze, a solitary courier arrived at a downtown Tampa law office, carrying an envelope marked with a red crest and labeled, "Final Instructions." Inside was not just a will, but a parting message from a man who, in many ways, had already achieved immortality in the eyes of millions. Hogan's final will, painstakingly prepared and updated 6 months before his death, contained not only his wishes for possessions and finances but an entire blueprint for his legacy, from who would speak at his funeral to which specific wrestling belt would lie atop his casket, and even the music that would play during his final farewell. It was deeply personal, 34 pages long, some typed, some handwritten, and authenticated with care and intention. More than just a legal document, it was Hogan's final promo, unscripted, raw, and impossible to ignore. It began with humor cloaked in sorrow. "Brother, if you're reading this, then the big boot's been dropped and I've finally gone over the top rope one last time." The room where the will was read was filled with stunned silence, broken only by sniffles and the rustling of tissues. Among those present were his family, close friends, former wrestling rivals, and WWE executives. They all listened as the man who had carried the torch of wrestling into mainstream culture for over 4 decades bared his soul one last time. Among the surprising revelations were instructions to build the House of Hulkamania, not a glitzy WWE museum, but an independent, fan-driven space in Clearwater, Florida, that would showcase memorabilia, personal stories, and a single empty chair meant for anyone who needed a quiet moment to reflect. His will included a $100,000 gift to Luis Santiago, a janitor from Madison Square Garden, who once sat beside Hogan after a loss and shared a sandwich without asking for anything in return. It was a small act of humanity that left a permanent mark on Hogan, a man who admitted he'd sometimes forgotten how to feel like a person instead of a brand. This thread of humility ran through every part of his will. He asked for a funeral with no suits unless people truly wanted to wear them, no pyro, no corporate speeches, just friends and fans telling stories. He asked that only those who had shared the ring with him carry his casket, including legends like Kevin Nash, Edge, The Undertaker, and Triple H. And for Scott Hall, who had passed, Hogan left a note: if he were here, he'd be one of them. Honor him somehow. To his daughter Brooke, he left the rights to his unreleased music, over 70 songs of raw emotion, ballads, and poems he'd written in secret. To his son Nick, he left a Harley Davidson with the note, "Ride this when you're lost. It always brought me back home." But it wasn't just about family. The will revealed a long-hidden reconciliation with Randy, Macho Man, Savage, whom Hogan had forgiven and cried with during a final phone call before Savage's death. To Lanny Poffo, Savage's brother, Hogan bequeathed a ring-worn robe as a symbol of peace and healing. Hogan also made charitable provisions totaling millions, including $2.5 million to children's cancer research and $1 million to a struggling wrestling school in Georgia, which he described as one of the last places where wrestling still feels real. He addressed his scandals and failings without excuse. He acknowledged the pain he caused, the mistakes he made, the times he let fame overtake humility. "I didn't always get it right," he wrote. "But I never stopped trying to be better." One letter was addressed solely to Vince McMahon, its contents kept private, but Hogan noted it was both an apology and a thank you. "You gave me the ring to become immortal," he wrote. "That gift can't be bought." In a final act of legacy-defining generosity, Hogan gave the rights to his name and likeness not to WWE, but to a nonprofit foundation, the Hogan Heart Foundation, which would use proceeds to support underprivileged youth in sports, mental health programs for athletes, and scholarships for single mothers. "My face made millions," he wrote. "Now let it serve millions." His funeral was packed despite his wishes for simplicity. Vince McMahon arrived early, silent and weathered. Ric Flair entered with sunglasses concealing his grief, leaning on Shawn Michaels. Wrestlers from across generations, Cena, Orton, Reigns, Punk, gathered in respectful silence. 6 men carried his casket, A humble oak finish with red and yellow trim, through the chapel, topped with his original WWF title belt and a folded bandana. Ric Flair opened the eulogies, recalling their decades-long bond and Hogan's unforgettable passion. Brooke Hogan followed, speaking softly of her imperfect but always present father. The final speaker shocked the room. Mark Calloway, The Undertaker, who broke character and shared a raw tribute to their complicated, loyal friendship. Later, in a private gathering at Hogan's home, friends raised glasses and remembered the man who taught them to rip shirts and heal hearts. The wrestling industry felt the quake. The Hogan Hart Foundation launched with $5 million and growing support. WWE committed to funding, dedicating a Hall of Heroes wing and donating WrestleMania proceeds. Brooke Hogan now chairs the board overseeing all future use of her father's legacy. But perhaps the most poignant relic left behind was an unpublished autobiography titled, For When I'm Gone. Handwritten over 3 years, it was Hogan's most personal confession, a look at the man who often felt the weight of invincibility. He admitted fears of fading, of becoming irrelevant, of being strong in public while broken in private. He wrote about Scott Hall's death, about nights when pain gripped his body, and about his deepest regret, not the scandals, but forgetting how to ask for help. I hope my kids remember me as someone who kept trying, he wrote near the end. The journal will be part of a rotating exhibit in the House of Hulkamania, which is being built just miles from his former Clearwater home. The museum won't just showcase belts and boots. It will show video messages, fan drawings, letters from children, and yes, even his failures, displayed honestly in a room dedicated to redemption. WWE aired a 12-minute tribute narrated by John Cena, who reflected on Hogan's strength not in muscle but in humility. AEW offered their respects. Even Linda Hogan appeared publicly, speaking candidly about the man she once loved, his struggles, and the legacy he left behind. Social media lit up in tribute. Fans, celebrities, and former critics united under #ThankYouHogan. The Rock, Stone Cold, Sasha Banks, all shared messages acknowledging the magnitude of his legacy. At a house show in Tampa, the lights dimmed, Real American played, but no one came out. A spotlight shone on a pair of yellow boots at the top of the ramp. The crowd stood and applauded, not out of habit, but in reverence. On the video board, one final line appeared. Hulkamania never dies. And in the end, it truly hasn't. Because Hulk Hogan didn't just body slam giants or rip t-shirts. He gave generations a hero to believe in, a reason to dream, and a voice that echoed long after the music faded. Through his will, his words, and his vulnerability, he left behind a reminder that real immortality is not living forever, it's being remembered for how you lived. And Hulk Hogan lived loud, loved fiercely, stumbled often, but never stopped coming back. That's what made him real. That's what made him unforgettable. And that's why Hulkamania lives forever.